great. Very good. All right, so Evelyn, have you shared the screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem that big. If this is okay.
That's all right. It works for me.
Okay.
Evelyn, if you click F11, it should make that a full screen.
Thank you.
All right. Shall I get started?
Please.
All right. Thank you. Jaynie and I will do this jointly so you can get a combined perspective both from a city staffer as well as a commissioner. And so we'll kind of tag team as we go through this. If you would go to the next slide, please. Our Forward Dallas comprehensive plan that was touched on by a few of the earlier presenters has been in place in Dallas since 2006. And it was, in fact, the first comprehensive land use plan that the city had adopted that was specifically referenced in our zoning code. So you can imagine that for the vast majority of Dallas's history, the city, in fact, lacked a comprehensive land use plan. And Forward Dallas was our first attempt to put one in place. So here we are, 14 years since that plan was adopted, 16 years since it was initiated as a process. And it's clearly time for us to revisit it for a variety of reasons. And as we do that, some of our main goals are to refresh our future growth and land development vision through community engagement and to design a program of proactive city interventions that can move us towards those desired changes. And then, as importantly, establish a discipline of actually monitoring progress and measuring outcomes. Next slide, please. So there are, as some of you are probably painfully aware, there are many citywide plans in the city of Dallas. And it's important to realize that for a city the size of Dallas, with an organization as large as Dallas, it is inevitable that there will be multiple plans because there are many different areas of specialty involved in running and managing a city. And so this gives you a sense of how the proposed comprehensive land use plan update is kind of positioned relative to all these other plans. We have a number of city policy plans. A few of them are pretty recent. There is a recently adopted comprehensive environmental and climate action plan. There's an ongoing mobility plan. There's an ongoing economic development plan. And we recently adopted a new comprehensive housing policy. We also have a number of what we call facility plans that are focused on specific facilities that the city is responsible for, like the library system, our park system, our various airports, our convention center, and then also quite importantly, our ongoing city bond programs, whereby the city actually allocates capital to actually do specific infrastructure investments throughout the city. So our goal here is from a land use perspective to focus on how we can take these various other plans and identify land use issues that we can respond to and incorporate into our vision. And over on the right-hand side, ultimately, what our objective is to enable our city manager and our city council to use our comprehensive land use plan and the strategic actions that we recommend to really inform a longer-term strategic plan that can be used as a frame of reference for annual decisions that are made or cyclical decisions that are made that involve investment or policy changes, right? So the idea is that whereas we now are often very reactive, we hope that this will give us an opportunity to be a little more strategic and intentional behind how we do things. Next slide. I want to touch on three really important aspects to the approach that we are taking that I think can give you a preview of the types of things that we are hoping to do. This slide shows you 8 topics or themes that we've preliminarily identified. We didn't just invent them, but they are themes that have been resonating across the city for a while and are also resonating with recent planning initiatives. So for example, we do intend to address the issue of fostering mixed income neighborhoods. We intend to address the issue of transit-oriented development to promote access to better transit, etc. And so each of these themes are essentially picking up on an issue that has been with us often for decades that has a direct relevance to land use and land use policy. And I've highlighted on this slide, we have in particular identified the idea of mitigating land use and zoning inequity as a particular focus that we want to pay attention to in and of itself. Even while each and every one of these themes that are on this slide also have equity relevance. So for example, when we talk about mixed income neighborhoods, the issue of equity clearly resonates there. When we talk about transit-oriented development, the issue of equity resonates there as well. But the theme here that we've highlighted really sort of hopefully expresses our intent to pay particular attention to the issue of our existing land use, our existing zoning, and the extent to which it reflects historical inequities that we should attempt to address. Next slide. The second really important aspect to our approach is that we want to establish a system for evaluating growth. Growth is often incremental, as someone mentioned. It is complicated, and it is very difficult under normal circumstances for council members, city plan commissioners in the heat of the moment, in the context of one particular site, to be able to have the benefit of the context and how that action will actually have an impact on getting us either closer to or further away from our goals. So one of the things we hope to accomplish through this process is to pay particular attention to defining performance metrics as it relates to land use and development. And over on the right, you can see that we've identified, in planning theory circles, the so-called 3 E's of looking at environmental sustainability, looking at economic vitality, and looking at equity, and constantly using those lenses to see how our actions are balanced in achieving those objectives. Right, and as you probably know, it is possible for a particular action that's taken by the city or by a private individual that could advance economic vitality while not necessarily, in fact, being negative to the city from the standpoint of the environment or equity. And so this idea of actually using these 3 lenses to constantly trying to establish a balance is part of our objective. We also want to look at using a system of evaluating growth also through modeling so that we can explore alternatives, so that we could explore the idea of what if the city were to take this big move, this big action, what can we expect to see as an outcome? And thereby help inform the community as we go through this process, as well as the ultimate decision makers, city council and city plan commission, on what are the possible impacts or outcomes of the actions that we take. And then lastly, we really want to also introduce a system and discipline of monitoring. Because as I said, any one action that the city takes may not break the camel's back. But on the other hand, every little action ultimately adds up to something. And so our idea of being able to, over periods of time, periodically checking in to how we are doing through our cumulative actions in terms of getting closer to our goals. Next slide. The third important aspect of our approach is trying to create a framework for planning at different scales. I think there was some good information earlier about the importance of neighborhood planning. the idea of how neighborhood planning or small area planning works in relation to citywide planning is something that just doesn't happen automatically on its own. It needs a framework by which this planning at different scales can work together. And so one of our objectives in this process is to try to establish a framework for doing that. So in this slide, you see a preliminary approach to us doing that that's derived, at least in good part, by the current framework by which the city delivers services. You know, the city has so-called service districts by which the police department, the code department, sanitation department actually deploy their services. So we've used that as a starting point and also used the information we have based on neighborhoods that have registered with the city to kind of divide the city initially into areas by which we can facilitate area planning and neighborhood engagement, as well as help support interagency collaboration that's so important in these issues, not only within departments in the city, but also with other public agencies that have a significant impact on land development. And then lastly, this also would be a framework by which we can also look at equity at different scales. So something that's good for the city as a whole may be bad for a particular neighborhood, right? And so this would enable us to help establish a monitoring framework by which we can keep an eye on that. Next slide. So I'll give you a quick sense here of the time frame. This is by no means a quick process. We're looking at this in terms of 3 phases. You can see that we are now roughly, somewhere in the third quarter of 2020. And so what this tells you is phase 1 has been mostly about preparation, and we are now at the tail end of that preparation. And we're getting ready to launch this process. And phase 2 will be really the community engagement and the scenario development evaluation stage of that process that will involve a variety of engagement mechanisms. I want to acknowledge for a moment here that given the times we're in, we expect to face some real difficult challenges in trying to reach out to people given the COVID-19 situation. And so we are going to be particularly looking for ways in which we can do that better. We are, of course, going to try to be really as robust as possible through online engagement. We realize that that won't succeed in reaching everyone. So we do want to find other ways in which through such things as ambassador programs that tries to cultivate neighborhood leadership to be more involved and help spread the word, or through partnerships with stakeholder groups who can, through their networks, help keep people informed. And then ultimately in the phase 3, once we go through that process, it's going to involve a lot of engagement, a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, get to the point of actually drafting the plan so that it can be brought up for the official public adoption process. And as you can see here, we've budgeted for a fair amount of time in that because these processes usually take time. There will be as much debate during that adoption process as there will be through the process itself. Next slide. I do want to, before I turn over to Jaynie, I wanted to emphasize again, since Dallas has a pretty long history of doing plans that sit on the shelf and don't necessarily get implemented, a particular focus on a desire for us to be implementation oriented. And there are a few specific things I want to point out that based on my experience of previous planning in the city, I want to attempt to accomplish with a particular focus on trying to make sure that this plan enables implementation as much as possible. So one key thing that Jaynie may want to jump in and talk about is that we are in the process of setting up a comprehensive land use plan committee of the City Plan Commission. We think that the issue of comprehensive land use planning is important enough to deserve a dedicated committee that can not only be directly involved in facilitating the process of its update, but live beyond that to actually be a facilitator for proactive implementation and monitoring as well. And then we also want to make sure that the way the plan is written is that it includes a robust implementation program that is set up to be reviewed on a regular cycle and updated on a regular cycle in coordination with annual budgeting processes. And then lastly, also have a way by which we can review priorities for area planning, specifically to support city-initiated zoning changes, so that these area planning processes can engage the community appropriately and provide the appropriate backdrop for informing those zoning changes. So at this point, I'm going to pause. If you go to the next slide, Jaynie, you're going to end up here, and if you have anything else to add to what I said,
I
I'm
did,
sure
and
that'd be
actually, if you
appreciated.
don't mind, if we could go back one slide, that would be great. I'm just going to touch on this, and then I'll talk about what I want to talk about. And that is on this slide, if you look at the standing comprehensive, the first point, it's thanks to Jennifer Rangel and Evelyn Mayo that we really thought very carefully about who should be on this committee. Now, nothing's been decided because it's still going through the City Plan Commission Rules Committee, because we have to adjust some of the formal committees to prepare for this one. But because of their help and their insight, we actually are working really hard to hopefully get adopted in that Rules Committee representatives that will also speak through the lens of social equity and environmental sustainability and neighborhood revitalization, all of the issues that really feed the whole equity engine and the things that need to be changed. So we're hoping that folks, as I said, folks with those lenses will sit on this committee that'll be a permanent committee that will look at this plan as it unfolds and make sure that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. So I wanted to really bring up that point. The Rules Committee is in process right now, and hopefully in the next month or so will make its recommendation to the Plan Commission. And of course, you all have a chance to speak during that. Jennifer and Evelyn know how to get that arranged for any of you who want to speak to that part of it in general. So now we can go to the next part that I want to talk about. Before I jump into the details, I want to say a few things. First of all, I want to thank you all for reaching out to include us. It's a privilege to be able to work with people who are willing to give their time and effort into making change. And I want to take a minute and just share a few thoughts in general. I'd like to see a future in Dallas with no need for neighborhood self-defense because of land use decisions. The land use decisions that are a result of business and city and resident collaboration won't need self-defense. I hope we never ever have to, I hope we fulfill our goal with this and don't ever have to use that phrase again. The way to get there, though, I believe, is to organize, organize, organize. Develop healthy relationships with the city staff and the city council. Work alongside good developers and work hard to defeat bad ideas. Create an area plan that signals to developers what you want. So one of the things that was brought up in the presentation before ours is talking about the forwardDallas. forwardDallas is not a zoning plan. And I want to be really clear about that, because the way that zoning is going to get changed in this city now is going to be through authorized hearings and through area by area rather than the whole city like it was done in the 1980s. And so what that means is that in the process for authorized hearings, is being changed through city council right now. And those that have a neighborhood plan, an adopted neighborhood plan, are going to move up on the ranks. So I recommend that as you're doing your amazing work with area plans, that you get them adopted, go through the process, push Pierre and his team to get those adopted so that they can move up in the authorized hearing and we can actually change the zoning. So that's the first point. The second point, thank you. The second point that I want to bring forward is I hope for Southern Dallas that you really, really fight cutting down trees. Trees are the most valuable asset in Southern Dallas besides the people. You, Southern Dallas, are the lungs of all of Dallas, and you must lead the preservation for all of us. There are so many people that stand ready to help, but it has to come from Southern Dallas, and we're all ready to help you do that. The other thing that I'd like you to work on is fighting massive warehouse development. Please don't let the warehouse speculators come in. The owners of warehouse space don't want to build multi-story buildings on a smaller footprint, but you can demand it. You can demand solar and green roofs, better landscaping, and nowhere near the places you want housing and retail. As my colleagues have heard me say on multiple occasions, warehouses, batch plants, and mini storage should not allowed to be developed near the places where people live, because by design, those businesses are meant to be devoid of human life. The update to Forward Dallas is potentially a game changer for engagement between the residents, the city, and developers. The key will be y'all demanding a role and your voice being heard. Make sure you're educated about the issues. That's where Southern Sector Rising, Downwinders at Risk, and Inclusive Communities projects come in. Use them. They're super, super smart and accessible. The Place It is a great program. I hope that we can bring that into North Dallas for parts of my district that need help organizing themselves. I am personally happy to help, and whenever I can. And if we can just go back to that last slide of Pierre's presentation, I just want to share a couple of really great tools for you to so take a screenshot of this, or I'm sure Evelyn will share this.
My
if we
screen
can pull
share.
that one up.
Yeah, my screen share just ended, but
Whoops. Okay, well, we can send that out to people, but the bottom line of it is, let's see if it'll work. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Evelyn. Okay, so let me just go through these quickly, and then we'll open it up for questions or however y'all want to end the program. First of all, the Planning and Urban Design Department, Pierre's shop, has a fantastic set of tools of registering neighborhood organizations and training neighborhood organizations. So please work with them. They are really there for you, and they're ready. So you can just email them at pud@dallascityhall.com. The other thing is, if you please keep track of every zoning case in your district, and I'd like to recommend citywide, so you can register yourself on this email to Liliana Lopez. I communicated with her today and let her know she may get a bunch of emails that people want to be on the early notification list. So when you email her, say, please add me to the early notification list. Make sure your council member and your city planning commissioner know you and know that you're coming from an honest place of a true heart. Finally, attend the council meetings, attend the planning commission meetings. The schedules are there, and now all of them, because of COVID, we have to have registered speakers in advance for planning commission, which we didn't have to have before. So please make sure that you register to speak so that you can be included. And then again, I should have put my email address on there. I did not, but you're more than welcome to email me at cpc-d11@dallascityhall.com. And if I can ever be of help, I certainly will. So I guess that's it. And again, thank you so much for including me. And I look forward to hearing everything else that's left to be said tonight. Thank you.